This is a brand new Chevy Bolt. That's Bolt with a B, like boy band, and not Volt. I clarify this because some people, even some car enthusiasts, have no idea that this thing exists, even though on paper it's amazing. It's a brand new electric car that will do 238 miles between charges. That's twice the range of its mainstream electric rivals, like the Nissan Leaf and the Ford Focus Electric and that Mitsubishi that looks like an egg-shaped golf cart. More importantly, the Bolt isn't really all that expensive compared to rivals. It starts at just $37,500, or just $30,000 after the federal tax incentive. $37,500 to go 238 miles. Those numbers are unrivaled in the car industry, except for the new Tesla Model 3, which will reportedly go 220 miles for $35,000. Those are pretty similar numbers, and yet the Tesla Model 3 is sold out for years. People are obsessing over it. Tesla fans are retweeting every time Elon Musk sneezes, whereas the Bolt isn't selling. Most people haven't heard of it, and it's just not cool. Today, I'm going to find out why that is. Before I get started, here are some facts to back up my theory of the Bolt's uncoolness. Chevrolet recently announced that they are idling the plant that makes the Bolt because inventories are just too high. How high exactly? Well, right now, listed on AutoTrader, there are 3,599 Bolts for sale across the country. $35.99. You know how many Tesla Model 3s there are for sale on AutoTrader? Zero. Admittedly, the Model 3 isn't quite out just yet, but the point remains. The Bolt has giant inventories, whereas for the Model 3, people were lining up for weeks ahead of time in order to give Tesla a $1,000 interest-free loan so that they could maybe have the chance to have a Model 3 sometime in the next couple of years. So today, I'm going to try to figure out what the Bolt doesn't have. I borrowed this Bolt from a viewer here in New Jersey, and I'm going to show you all of its cool quirks and interesting features, and then I'm going to take it out on the road and see how this thing drives. And at the end, I'm going to give it a Doug score. And for more of my thoughts on the Bolt and the Bolt experience, click the link below to go to autotrader.com/oversteer. Now, on to the quirks. Now this car has a lot of interesting quirks and features, so get ready. I'll start with the first thing you notice the second you climb inside, and that's the gear lever. For some reason, electric and hybrid cars just have to have a bizarre gear lever, and the Bolt is no different. Now, when you first start the car, it's in park, and that makes sense, that's fine. But when you want to put it in reverse, you have to push a little button on the side of the gear lever and then push it up and to the left to get it into reverse. When you want to put it into drive, you push the same button, then pull it down, and then you're in drive. And when you put it in drive, a previously unseen L for low range appears on the gear lever. Gives you kind of a futuristic look. When you want to go back to park, you don't push it anywhere to go into park. Instead, you just push the little button at the top of the gear lever that says P, and that puts you in park. Next up, I want to talk about the Bolt's center screen. Now, this is a giant center screen by modern car standards, although not quite up to the level of Tesla, but it contains an enormous amount of stuff. But right now, I want to show you some of the weird things that I found while I was going through this screen. The most interesting quirk is that there is a setting in this screen for literally every function on this car. For example, you can alert it to tell you if your charge cord has been stolen. You're charging up, your cord gets stolen, and it sends you a note, hey, by the way, someone just stole your charge cord. But that isn't my favorite weird setting. My favorite weird setting is the chime volume. You can adjust the chime volume up and down. In most cars, it's like low or high. In this car, it's a range with a 2-digit number, and the lowest setting is 24 and the highest setting is 38. So there's a 14 number range in there. I don't know why it's not just 1 to 14. I don't know why they chose 14 numbers, but you can go from 24 to 38 with your chime volume. I personally like my chime volume at 32. 30 if I'm trying to create kind of a low-key night on the town atmosphere. Next up, the giant screen shows all of your energy usage, which is common in most electric and hybrid cars, but this one really gets in depth to the point where I don't even want to get into all this stuff. The one cool thing is it gives you a score, how you're doing compared to how you could be doing or how you've been in the past. My score is not very high. And then here's a feature that every car should have. There's a setting for maximum startup volume. That's for the radio. So when you get in and the last person who drove it was blaring the music, there's a maximum level the radio will start at. So even if the last person had it on 87, you can control it so that it won't start higher than 25. So when you get in the car on Monday morning at 7 a.m. after it's been driven on the weekend, your eardrums aren't blown out by crazy electronic music from those darn kids. And speaking of those darn kids, this car even has a teen driver function so that when you you give your car over to your teen driver, you can limit stuff like the stereo volume and the speed. It requires the inputting of a PIN, so your teen can't go in there and change it. Another cool thing, this car has a rear seat reminder feature. Basically, it can tell if before you get in and drive, you open the rear seat to put something back there, presumably a child seat. And that way, if you get out without opening the rear door, it reminds you that, hey, you might want to look back there so you don't forget your kid in the back of the car. That is a really good idea. Slightly less well executed is the option to change the language. It says language, so you can change the language, and then in parentheses, it also says language, so you can change your language, or your language. General Motors. And one of my favorite Bolt quirks is the brake lights. Now, first off, just the appearance of the brake lights when they're on is pretty cool, kind of futuristic looking. But the most interesting thing about the brake lights is that they're mounted on the rear hatchback. Now, in the United States, brake lights and headlights cannot legally be mounted on a piece of movable bodywork. In other words, a hatchback or a hood, you can't put your brake lights there because if your hood is up or your hatchback's up, nobody can see them. But Chevy figured out an interesting way around that that's also used by a couple of other cars. Namely, when you open the hatchback, watch down here. Open it up, the brake lights instantly shift. Suddenly, they're no longer in the hatchback, they're down in the bumper, which is a fixed piece of bodywork. When you close the hatch, once again, the brake lights switch right back to where they were before. It's an interesting solution to kind of a weird problem because of federal regulations. Now, interestingly, the turn signals fall under the same federal regulation. They also can't be on a moving piece of bodywork. Chevy could have done the same thing with the turn signals, put one set in the tailgate and then another second redundant set in the bumper in case the tailgate ever opened, but they just figured, nah, screw it. And so there's only one set of turn signals in the bumper on a fixed piece of bodywork where they don't have to worry about that regulation. Another interesting quirk about this car, check out the situation back here with the reversing camera. Now, like most cars, the backup camera in this one is mounted on the tailgate right above the license plate. And there are two of them. One is a wide angle camera just for the regular reversing camera, and the other one is for the 360-degree camera. The third thing back there, that would be the washer jet for the cameras. In case they get grimy or dirty, there is a separate washer that will squirt fluid onto them so that they can stay clean. I've reviewed a lot of cars, including a lot of really expensive cars, and I've never seen that feature before, but I gotta admit, it is pretty cool. Since I'm around back, another interesting feature of this car, it has like a two-stage cargo area. You have the normal cargo area, which is what most people see, but then if you lift this up, there's a second cargo area underneath the floor, so you can hide stuff from anybody who hasn't seen this video. Another interesting feature in this car, take a look at these seats. You notice anything weird? How about the fact that the outside of the seats is white and the inside is gray? The seats are asymmetrically colored. I'm not exactly sure why they did that, but it gives it kind of a cool look. It looks like the whole interior is rimmed in white, whereas the center is gray to match the center console bits and pieces in the car. Another interesting quirk of the infotainment system is a feature called Hilltop Reserve. Now, Hilltop Reserve sounds like the kind of place I would try to shoot one of these videos and then get kicked out by a guy driving a Chevy Silverado. You can't film in Hilltop Reserve. But actually, it's kind of a neat feature in this car. If you set Hilltop Reserve to on, it only charges the car to 90%. And that way, if, for example, you live at the top of a hill, you can use regenerative braking to get the last 100% of charge when you drive to work or drive wherever you're going. The theory being that that way you don't have to waste any of the energy created by regenerative braking. They really thought of everything. Now, one of the main reasons I suspect a lot of Tesla owners will claim that they didn't buy a Bolt is because it doesn't have all the technology that you'll find in a Tesla, but actually you'd be surprised how much technology is in this car. For example, in addition to the regular backup camera, there is a 360-degree camera. There's also a lane keep assist feature that will steer you back into your lane, and lane departure warning to know if you're starting to get out of your lane. There's a feature that measures your following distance in the car in front of you and gives you a little green, yellow, red depending on how far you are. I've never seen that before, and it's kind of cool. Of course, the car will beep at you like crazy if you get too close to a car in front of you. So it's got forward collision warning and automatic forward collision braking. It has a blind spot monitoring system to let you know if someone is in your blind spot. It has automatic high beams so that you don't have to adjust them when you're on a dark road. It'll turn them on and off for you when cars are coming. In back, it has heated rear seats, and in the front, it has a heated steering wheel, which is nice. And one of my favorite Bolt party tricks is the fact that it has a remote ignition so that you can start it before you get in the morning. The weird thing is, I don't know how you know that it has started. It's an electric car, so it doesn't make any noise, but the benefit is it can run the heater before you climb inside so the car is nice and warm when you want to get in. Okay, I was so curious about that one, I had to figure out how it worked. How do you remote start an electric car? Well, it turns out, you press the lock button and then you hold down the remote start button until the lights come on, as they just have. The car itself doesn't remote start, but the climate control does turn on. Right now, the air conditioning is blowing, so it is nice and cool on this hot day when I get in my car. Then I simply push the power button, and I'm ready to go. So this car has a lot of high-tech features and some cool little quirks that make it kind of interesting, but like all cars, there are a few drawbacks. One of them is the seats. They're surprisingly narrow. The owner warned me about this, but they're narrower than I expected. I can barely get all of me on them, and I'm not exactly a large person. Also on the subject of the seats, how about the fact that this is the ultra high-level Bolt with every feature and option, and it doesn't have power seats. They can do a hilltop reserve mode, but they can't put power seats in the thing. It seems a little bit strange. And then there's probably my least favorite thing in this car, something that most people probably would never notice, but I spend a lot of time in cars and I notice stuff like this. When you roll down the window on the driver's side or the passenger side, you can see the door panel sort of expand to allow for the window to come into it. It's something that most Bolt owners probably will never notice, and you probably won't notice it if you have one, but I think it makes the car feel just a little bit cheaper inside than it should. So the Bolt has some cool stuff, and it has some unusual stuff, but how does it drive? Time to get it out on the road and find out. I'm actually kind of excited about this. I was excited when this car was announced, and they said they could get 240 miles for 35 grand, and I was like, I don't know. And then they came out with it and they got 240 miles for 35 grand. It's a pretty good deal. The first thing I noticed with this car, it's quiet, obviously, all these electric cars. Between the fact that there's no engine noise, the road noise is pretty muted and there's not a lot of wind rush coming in, and I'm going about 40. I love the center gauge cluster. It's so funny because General Motors, when I grew up, General Motors made the worst gauge clusters. They were just all terrible. Well, the worst fonts, and they just were so ugly compared to the Europeans. And you could just look at them and say, well, this is one of the many reasons why General Motors can't make good cars. But this one is now like ultra modern, high tech. It looks awesome. There are a few blank switches. There's some plastic, but that's also true in the Teslas. All right, I'm gonna floor it here. Trip the tires. Whoa. That is actually really quick. I can't believe that. I see these on the road and I'm like, oh, it's just a little egg-shaped electric car, like the Leaf. It does 0 to 60 in 11 seconds. Well, no, this does 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, which is like what a WRX was a few years ago. Now, I grant you, it's no like Model S, Model X, but this isn't a slow car. All right, here we go. I got some space. Oh man, it hauls. It actually really kind of moves. It's more of a novelty thing though, of course, because at the end of the day, this car has a higher center of gravity and it just won't handle and hold the road like, you know, some of these, like a Tesla, but also other cars that do 0 to 60 in 6.5. I like on the range meter that it shows me my potential maximum range and my potential minimum range. That's a really good idea. It also gives me what its estimate is, which is 215, but it says it could go as much as 253 if I behave myself, or if I keep doing those foot on the floor things, it'll be 176. The visibility in this car is really good. I think one of the problems that people have with this car is that it has sort of this minivan demeanor to it, in the sense that the front windshield sort of just goes and goes and goes, like in a Honda Odyssey or whatever. And so it kind of feels like a minivan, especially the driving position. And I get that, but the benefit of that is that the visibility is excellent in every direction and you can really see everything. The owner of this car is married and he has a kid, and this is a family car for him, and so it's usable in that sense too. I mean, I don't think it could swallow 3 kids and parents and strollers and all that stuff, but for a small family it works. Handling is fine. It's especially fine for a sort of a tall hatchback. Like Kia Soul doesn't handle this well. In the end, this car is really, really, really competent. And I'm not just saying that, I really think this is like a well put together car. I think it's got a cool interior. It's got a lot of tech. It's quick, it's fun. I like the cool screens. It's comfortable inside, good visibility. I mean, this is a really good effort in an electric car, and I can go 238 miles according to the EPA. According to the car, more like 270 miles if I really keep my foot out of it. So that's the Chevy Bolt. It's a neat car with some amazing numbers. Its range is incredible, especially considering its price point. It has a lot of cool features and new technology, and it drives reasonably well, and it's pretty fast, which brings us back to our main point. Why isn't this car cool? What is holding the Bolt back from achieving the celebrity status that the Tesla Model 3 has? One could argue that styling plays a role. The Bolt looks more like a standard hatchback or maybe even a minivan, whereas the Model 3 looks more futuristic. Fine. Model 3 fans would probably also point to performance, but get this, the Bolt does 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds. That's really impressive, and it's only 0.9 seconds off the Model 3's 0 to 60 of 5.6 seconds. For context, that egg-shaped Mitsubishi electric car does 0 to 60 in 13 seconds, and a normal car, like for example a Honda Civic, does it in just under 8. So this thing isn't really all that slow, but nonetheless, while I haven't driven a Model 3, I admit the Bolt is a little bit slower and it probably doesn't corner as well. Fine, I'll give the Model 3 that too. Okay, but what else? The Chevy Bolt has a longer range than the base level Tesla Model 3. With dealer discounts, it's definitely cheaper. It has a lot of cool technology and new features, and most importantly, it's available now, today. You could buy one of these today instead of forking over $1,000 just so you can tell your friends that yes, you drive a Dodge Neon now, but in 2 years, really, you're gonna have that cool Tesla that you've been hearing about. Admittedly, I think the Model 3 is cool too. Really, I do, and I can't wait to drive one. But I think the truth is we all know why the Model 3 has been so hyped and the Bolt has fallen flat, and that is right here. The simple truth is that Chevy just isn't as cool as Tesla. And while a lot of Tesla owners claim that they're doing it for the environment and they want the electric car to save the planet, the truth is that I think a lot of them just want the hot new car from the cool new car company. Which is fine, but if you want an electric car with great numbers and a reasonable price that's available right now, and you don't want to wait for your car to be delivered in Tesla standard time, here's your alternative.
Now it's time for the Doug score, starting with the weekend categories and styling, where the Bolt is fine. It has some cool details, but it's not exactly thrilling, so it gets a 5 out of 10. Acceleration, the Bolt does 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, strong for an electric car, but not for the Doug score, where it gets a 3 out of 10. Handling, the Bolt is fine, but not exceptional, especially in the company of the cars I've tested, so it gets a 4 out of 10. Cool factor is debatable, as always, but right now this is still a cool new car, at least I think so it gets a 6 out of 10. Finally, importance. This is clearly a significant car for General Motors, an important vehicle in their lineup and for their future as electric cars start to become more common. It gets a 7 out of 10. That brings the total weekend score to just 25 out of 50, which makes sense. This isn't much of a car you want to drive on the weekends. As for the daily score, I suspect things will be a bit different. Starting with features, the Bolt does well. It's nicely equipped with a lot of desirable modern tech, but it's missing some stuff too, so it gets a 7 out of 10. Luxury measures comfort, and the Bolt is fine, not great, but not horrible, just about average, so it gets a 5 out of 10. Quality measures materials and reliability. Materials are decent, maybe just a bit above average, but reliability is unknown, and there's always a fear about buying a car, especially a car like this with a new powertrain, so early in its model run, so it gets a 5 out of 10. For practicality, the Bolt's 56.6 cubic feet of cargo volume would give it an 8, but this category also factors in gas mileage, and that easily bumps up the Bolt to a 9 out of 10. Note, I've also revised a few other cars' practicality scores to keep the Doug score consistent. Finally, for value, the Bolt's pricing is strong, especially since Chevy dealers are probably offering some great deals due to excess inventory. It gets an 8 out of 10, bringing the total daily score to 34 out of 50, right near the top. That makes sense as this is more of a daily car than most of the stuff that I test. Add it all up and the Bolt's Doug score is 59 out of 100. It's a good, solid car, an excellent effort. It may not be as cool as a Tesla, but if you want an electric car, this really should be near the top of your shopping list.